Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. When I first moved into the neighborhood, I thought I'd finally found peace. The street was quiet, the lawns neatly trimmed, and everyone waved politely. My house sat right beside an older two-story home that looked slightly worn, but charming in a nostalgic kind of way. The man who lived there was named Mr. Holden. He looked to be in his late 50s, gray hair, pale skin, and eyes that never seemed to blink long enough. The first night I noticed something strange. At 3 a.m., his living room light was still on. I figured he was just an insomniac. But then the next night, and the one after that, it was always the same. Every night, the same light. Sometimes, I'd see him standing by his window, motionless, looking straight at my house. The curtain would move slightly, but he never seemed to. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to wave. He didn't wave back, just tilted his head slightly like he was studying me. Something about that moment made me feel cold, like I was being measured. That was the first time I realized this man didn't just have trouble sleeping. A few days later, I noticed something even stranger. Every morning, when I left for work around 7 a.m., Mr. Holden would already be standing outside his house, perfectly still, facing the street, as if waiting for something that never came. I tried saying hello once, but he didn't answer. He just smiled faintly, eyes never blinking, like a puppet whose strings were being pulled too tight. At night, I'd hear soft noises through the thin wall that separated our houses. Not TV, not music, whispering, low and rhythmic, like someone talking to themselves over and over. One evening, I decided to ask around. At the corner store, I mentioned my new neighbor to the cashier, a woman who'd lived there for years. Her face went pale. "You mean the Holden's house?" she asked. "That place has been empty since the fire." My stomach dropped. "What fire?" I whispered. She hesitated, glancing toward the door. 10 years ago. A man burned his family inside that house. They said he couldn't sleep for weeks before it happened. That night, I kept my blinds closed. But even through the thin fabric, I could feel his gaze. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint whisper from next door. Around 2 a.m., I got up and peeked through the blinds. The light in Mr. Holden's window was flickering like candlelight. And there he was again, standing, still, watching. This time his face was clearer, pale, waxy, his eyes completely black in the light. His head twitched slightly like he was struggling to stay upright. Suddenly the light went out. The darkness felt alive. A second later, there was a knock on my door. 3 slow taps. I froze. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing against my chest. I waited, praying it was just the wind or a prank. Then I heard it again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. When I finally gathered the courage to look through the peephole, no one was there. Just the empty street, slick with rain. But as I turned away, I heard something soft against the wood, like a fingernail dragging downward. The next morning, I found thin scratches near the bottom of my door, almost like claw marks. My heart sank. I tried convincing myself it was an animal, maybe a raccoon. But when I looked closely, the marks were too precise, straight and human-sized. Over the next few days, things got worse. At night, I'd hear footsteps on the gravel between our houses. Slow, deliberate pacing. One night, I saw movement through the window, someone walking in my backyard. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer. Just silence. When I checked the backyard with my flashlight, nothing was there, except bare footprints in the wet soil leading from Mr. Holden's yard to mine. And they stopped, right under my window. That night, I barely slept. I woke around 3 a.m. to a faint sound. A whisper, but closer now. Inside. I froze, eyes wide open. The whisper came from the closet. The closet door creaked open on its own, inch by inch. I gripped the lamp on my nightstand, ready to swing. But inside, there was nothing, just hanging clothes and darkness. Then I saw it. A small crack in the back wall of the closet, just wide enough to fit a hand through. I leaned closer. Cold air drifted out from it. That wall was supposed to separate my house from his. Terrified, I sealed the crack with duct tape and shoved a dresser against it. But that night, I woke up to scratching behind the dresser. Faint, persistent, like nails tapping from the other side. The next morning, I went outside to check his house again. His curtains were drawn, but I could see shapes moving inside, too many shapes for one man. I called the police. They checked the property but came back shaking their heads. "Sir, that house is abandoned. There's no one living there." When I insisted, the officer sighed. "Look, there's no electricity in that building. Hasn't been for years." That night, I couldn't shake what the officer said. If the house had no electricity, then what was powering those lights? I decided to test it myself. I set up my old camcorder facing his window before going to bed. Around 2:45 a.m., I heard the faint hum again, the kind that vibrates inside your bones. When I checked the screen, the camera showed his window lit up once more. But there was movement, not just one person, but 3 figures, standing side by side behind the glass. I replayed it, freezing the frame. Their faces were blurred, but something about their postures, unnatural. Then one of them moved closer to the window, and the moment they did, the camera feed cut to static. The screen went black. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. When I picked up, I heard whispering, faint and wet, like breath against the microphone. Then a low male voice said, "You shouldn't have looked." The line went dead. And from outside, the light in his house turned off again. The next morning, I drove to work, but couldn't focus. Every reflection, every parked car window, I half expected to see him staring back. That evening, I decided to confront whatever this was. As the sun set, I walked over to Mr. Holden's property. The front porch creaked beneath my steps. The door was locked but soft enough that one push made it swing open. The inside smelled of wet wood and smoke. Old furniture was scattered around. On one wall there were family photos, a woman and 2 kids. But their faces were scratched out with something sharp. The air felt wrong, heavy and cold, like the house was exhaling. I stepped into the living room. On the floor was a circle made of burnt candles and something black, maybe ash. And then I heard it. Footsteps upstairs, slow, dragging. "Mr. Holden?" I called out, voice trembling. No answer, just that steady dragging sound. And then a whisper. "You moved into my house." My body froze. The voice wasn't from upstairs anymore. It was right behind me. I turned, heart hammering. No one was there, just darkness. Then, from the corner, a faint glow began to rise. A mirror leaning against the wall reflected the flickering candlelight, but not my reflection. Instead, I saw him, Mr. Holden, standing exactly where I was, but smiling. The reflection tilted its head, just like he did the first night. Then it lifted its hand and pressed against the inside of the mirror. A crack formed in the glass, spreading outward like veins. Panicked, I ran out the front door and didn't stop until I reached my house. When I looked back, the house was completely dark again. No candles, no light, no movement. That night, I packed a bag. I didn't care where I went. I just needed to leave. But when I opened my front door to step outside, there was something waiting on my porch. A family photo, burned around the edges. It was the same photo from Mr. Holden's wall, except now, my face had been scratched out. I called the police again, shaking. When the officer arrived, I handed him the photo. He looked at it and then frowned. "Sir, this picture is at least 15 years old," he said. "These people died in the fire I told you about." "I know," I stammered. "But this one has my face on it." He studied me carefully, then sighed. "Maybe you need some rest." After he left, I sat in my living room with every light on. Midnight came, then 1, then 2, and then the power went out. All at once, my house fell into complete blackness. A faint orange light flickered through my window, coming from Mr. Holden's house. Then, faintly, I saw movement outside. Someone walking toward my door, carrying a lantern. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crouched behind the couch. The footsteps stopped outside, and then that same slow knock. 3 times. I didn't move. Then a voice, "You can't move out. You already live here." When I woke up, daylight was streaming through the windows. I was lying on the floor, the knife still clutched in my hand. I checked the door. It was wide open. On the floor was ash, forming a faint trail leading outside. I followed it to the property line, where it simply vanished into the dirt. The Holden house? Gone. No foundation, no remains. Just an empty patch of land, like nothing had ever been built there. Weeks passed. I moved across the state into a new apartment, trying to forget. But last night I woke up at 3 a.m. There was light, faint, flickering, coming through my window from the building across the street. And standing in that window was Mr. Holden, his head tilted, his eyes unblinking, watching. I closed the curtains, heart racing. But even now, as I write this, I can feel it. That presence, that stare pressing against the walls. Some neighbors never move away. Some neighbors never sleep. When I first moved into the old brick apartment complex downtown, I was just grateful to finally afford a place of my own. It wasn't perfect. The walls were thin, the pipes moaned at night, and the elevator stuttered like it was haunted by age. But it was home. My new neighbor, however, made it complicated. Apartment 4B. Her name was Evelyn, according to the faded name tag by her mailbox. I saw her only once, on the day I moved in. A frail woman with long black hair that hung over her face, standing barefoot in the hallway. She didn't speak, just stared. I remember trying to smile. "Hi, I'm..." She turned and quietly closed her door. Odd, I thought. But that night, I heard her voice, soft, almost singing, through the paper-thin walls. The melody was slow, old-fashioned, like something from a broken music box. It continued for hours. At around 3 a.m., I woke again. The singing had stopped, but now there was something else. A faint knock on the shared wall between our apartments. 3 times. Then silence. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. But just as I started to move away, I heard her whisper. Very close. open the door. The next morning, I brushed it off as a dream. Maybe the exhaustion from moving had messed with my head. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. When I passed her door on my way out, I noticed something strange, a key still hanging in the lock. I hesitated, debating whether to knock. But then I heard something inside. That same faint melody, humming, echoing softly through the wood. So I left it alone. That night, around 2 a.m., the humming started again. This time, louder. I couldn't sleep, so I put on my headphones. But even then, I could still hear it, as if it were inside my head. I finally banged on the wall. "Can you keep it down, please?" Instant silence. Then, a few seconds later, 3 slow knocks back. My heart pounded. I didn't respond. The next morning, I told the landlord about it. He frowned. "Evelyn? In 4B? "Yeah," I said. "She keeps me up at night." His face went pale. "Son, apartment 4B is empty. It's been vacant for over a year." I laughed awkwardly, thinking he was joking. "No, seriously, she's there." I saw her, but he just stared at me. No one's lived there since she died. The landlord's words echoed in my mind all day. He said she died. I tried to find records online, but all I could dig up was an old newspaper clipping. "Tenant found dead in apartment fire, Unit 4B." The article mentioned Evelyn Moore, mid-30s, lived alone, no family. Fire caused by faulty wiring, ruled accidental. But there was one line that froze me. Neighbors reported hearing her singing before the fire started. The melody continued long after the flames began. That night, I sat in my living room, lights dimmed, trying not to think about it. Then, at exactly 3:07 a.m., the humming started again. This time, it wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from inside my apartment. I turned slowly. The hallway light flickered, and in that half-second of brightness, I saw something move past the bathroom door. A woman, hair hanging over her face, bare feet leaving wet footprints on the floor. When the light flickered again, she was gone. But the humming never stopped. I didn't sleep at all that night. By dawn, I'd convinced myself I was hallucinating, lack of sleep, stress, whatever. But when I checked the floor, the footprints were still there. Small, pale, damp. They led straight to the wall I shared with 4B and stopped. That evening, I decided to put an end to it. I waited until midnight, then went into the hallway. The door to 4B looked normal. Old wood, brass handle, same peeling paint as mine. I knocked. No answer. I turned the knob. It opened easily. The air inside was cold and stale, heavy with the smell of burnt metal. I stepped inside. Everything was covered in a layer of ash. The wallpaper was blackened, curling off the walls. Furniture half melted, frozen mid-decay. And on the far wall, written in soot, was a single sentence: "Don't open the door." My throat tightened. I turned to leave, but the door had shut itself. My heart pounded as I grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Then I heard it. Faint singing again, from somewhere deeper in the apartment. It came from behind a half-collapsed wall, near where the kitchen used to be. I hesitated, then shined my phone's flashlight toward it. Behind the wall was a small, hidden doorway, half-burned, leading into what looked like a closet. I crouched and looked inside. There was a small wooden chair, and sitting on it was a charred doll, melted into the shape of the seat. And on the floor beside it, a cassette player. I pressed play, the same song, that same haunting lullaby I'd been hearing every night. And underneath it, faintly, another sound, breathing, human breathing. Then, in the reflection of the metal casing, I saw her, Evelyn, standing behind me. Her mouth wasn't moving, but the song was still playing. I dropped the cassette player and ran. The moment I reached the door, it swung open on its own, slamming hard against the wall. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping. The door to 4B stayed open behind me, black smoke curling out slowly. When I looked again, there was nothing inside, just darkness. The next day, I went to the landlord's office again. I went inside, I told him. You need to seal that unit. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Son, I told you it's condemned. We've boarded it up, I blinked. No, it's open. I was in there last night. He frowned. No, you weren't. Look, he led me upstairs. And there it was. Apartment 4B, its door completely sealed with plywood. Rusty nails hammered across it, old burn marks on the floor. But through the gaps in the wood, I could see something flickering inside. A small orange light, like candlelight. And faintly, the sound of singing. That night, I couldn't bear to stay home. I checked into a cheap motel across town, but at 3:07 a.m., I woke up. Same song, faintly playing from the hallway outside my room. I opened the door. Nothing. Just an empty corridor and humming fluorescent lights. Back inside, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. When I answered, the line was filled with static. And then, her voice. Don't open the door. The call ended. I stared at the phone, cold sweat on my neck. When I turned back toward the bathroom mirror, words were written in steam across it. Why did you open it? My breath caught. I hadn't used the shower. The room was freezing. That was when I realized. The melody wasn't just following me. It was inside me. In every reflection, every surface. It felt like she was there, waiting on the other side. Desperate, I drove back to the complex the next morning. I needed to end this. The landlord was gone, but I managed to pry off the boards with a crowbar I found in the maintenance room. Inside, the apartment looked even worse, darker, colder. But in the center of the floor now stood a single chair, untouched by time or ash. On the chair sat the same cassette player, but this time it was playing by itself. I stepped closer. A woman's whisper came through the tape. You let me out. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged. I turned and saw her again, clearer this time. Evelyn. Her skin pale and cracked, eyes sunken, but her mouth twisted into a smile that didn't move right. Please, I begged. I didn't mean to. She tilted her head. Now someone else has to live here. And the door behind me slammed shut. I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat. Morning light poured through the window. Was it a dream? I rushed out to check the hallway and froze. The door to 4B was gone. Not sealed, not burned, just gone. In its place was my door number, 4B. I stepped back, trembling. I checked my mail slot. It now read, Evelyn Moore. The hallway lights flickered. From behind me came a soft, familiar hum. I turned slowly. There she was, standing in my living room, humming her endless lullaby, her reflection already burned into the windows. Her face melted and blackened as she sang, skin flaking like ash. Then she stopped. You opened the door, she whispered, smiling. And now, you can't close it. I don't remember how long it's been. Days, maybe weeks. The building's gone quiet now. No one else lives here. Or maybe they do, and just can't hear me anymore. Every night at 3:07 a.m., the song starts again. Sometimes, I see her silhouette standing by the window. Other times, it's my own reflection singing back at me. I tried to move once. I packed, went to the door, but the moment I opened it, I was back inside the apartment again, trapped. I think I know what happened to her now. She opened a door she shouldn't have. And now, it's my turn to wait for the next tenant. Someone will move in, hear the music, knock on the wall, and when they open the door to apartment 4B, I'll be there. When I first moved into the building, the silence was the first thing that struck me. It wasn't the kind of peaceful quiet you find in the countryside. It was heavy, almost suffocating. The kind of silence that feels like something is listening. Apartment 3A was small, old, and cheap, and that was all I could afford. The walls were yellowed from age, and the hallway smelled faintly of damp carpet and dust. The landlord, Mr. Bruner, handed me the keys with a strange look. "You'll be right next to 3B, he said softly, like that should mean something. When I asked who lived there, he only shrugged. No one now. Used to be a woman, but she left. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The pipes groaned, and every creak sounded like a footstep. Around 2 a.m., I heard humming, a soft, repetitive tune. It came through the vent above my bed. 3 notes, the same melody again and again. I assumed it was a TV or maybe someone playing music low. But when I checked, the sound stopped. The next morning, I met Mrs. Lawson from 3C. She was kind, but looked tired. When I mentioned the humming, her face changed. "That's not music," she whispered. "That's her." I laughed awkwardly. "Who?" Mrs. Lawson looked down the hallway toward 3B. "The woman who used to live there. The one who never left." That night, I kept my lamp on. The humming didn't come this time. Instead, I heard a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the wall beside my bed. Then silence. I waited, heart pounding. After a few seconds, 3 more knocks. I pressed my ear against the wall and froze. There was breathing on the other side, slow, raspy, like someone standing inches away. I banged back once, hoping to scare whoever it was. The breathing stopped. The next morning, I found a slip of paper under my door. The handwriting was messy and uneven, written with something that looked like charcoal. "Don't answer her. Don't knock back." My hands shook. I ran outside to see who could have left it, but the hallway was empty. Only the door to 3B stood across from mine, sealed with a rusted padlock. I bent down to inspect it. Someone had nailed wooden boards across the frame, as if trying to keep something in. That night, I heard scratching. Light, slow, persistent scratching from the wall, like nails dragging over plaster. I turned up the TV, but underneath the noise, I could still hear her humming that same 3-note tune. 2 days later, I was in the laundry room downstairs when I saw an old corkboard filled with missing person flyers. One photo caught my eye. A woman in her 30s with long dark hair and hollow eyes. The caption read, "Missing, Emily Voss. Last seen in apartment 3B. I stared at it for a long time. The date on the flyer was from last year. I went back upstairs feeling uneasy. When I reached the 3rd floor, the hallway lights were off, except for the one flickering outside 3B. Someone had taped a photo to the door, the same woman, same haunting eyes. But the words scrawled beneath it made my stomach turn. "I'm still here." That night, I didn't sleep at all. I heard the humming again, closer this time, echoing through the vent. Then something new, whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like my name. At 3:12 a.m., I got up and checked the vent with my phone flashlight. Inside the dark metal grating, I saw a small clump of hair tangled around the screw. Human hair, I woke the next morning to a sour smell, something rotten seeping from the wall. I called the landlord to complain, but he didn't seem surprised. "Probably a dead rat," he muttered. "It happens." When I hung up, I pressed my palm against the wall between 3A and 3B. It felt warm. I don't know how to explain it. But the warmth pulsed, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. That night, I set my phone to record audio. I left it running while I tried to sleep. The next morning, I listened back. For the first 10 minutes, nothing. Then, faintly, the sound of humming. Then a whisper. She took my face. I dropped my phone, shaking. I replayed it a dozen times, hoping I misheard, but it was clear. A woman's voice. And then, at the very end, the sound of something dragging. A soft scrape against the floor, right outside my door. That night, the apartment felt colder than usual. I turned the heater up, but it didn't help. Around 1 a.m., the vent began rattling softly, not from air, but like something inside was trying to move. I held my breath and leaned closer. A voice whispered through it, faint, desperate. "Let me in." I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. My hands were shaking as I stared at the vent. The whisper came again, but louder. "Please, I can't see anymore. Let me in." I grabbed my phone and recorded it, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. Then something slid through the vent, a tiny folded piece of paper. I hesitated before picking it up. It was yellowed, brittle, and covered in smudged writing. "If you can read this, she's already found you. Don't look into her eyes. She'll take your reflection first. I wanted to leave, to run out and never come back. But outside, the wind howled, and the building creaked like an old ship. I crawled into bed, keeping the lights on. At some point, exhaustion took over. Just before I fell asleep, I heard a whisper next to my ear, not through the vent this time. "Why did you move into my home?" The next morning, I went straight to Mrs. Lawson's door. She looked startled when she saw me, pale, eyes sunken. I showed her the note from the vent. Her hands trembled as she read it. "You shouldn't have stayed in that apartment," she said. "Emily." She was a quiet girl, stayed to herself. But after her boyfriend left, people heard things. Crying, screaming, scratching. Then one day the police came, said she'd vanished, but nobody saw her leave. I asked her if anyone ever went inside 3B since then. Mrs. Lawson shook her head. Bruner sealed it up himself. He said there was something wrong with the walls that night. I tried to sleep again, but the smell was stronger now, metallic and sour. I could hear faint footsteps pacing on the other side of the wall. And then, for the first time, I heard the doorknob rattle. My front door, slowly, gently. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept toward it. The noise stopped. I waited for what felt like forever. Then, through the peephole, I saw her. A woman with long, tangled hair, standing perfectly still in the dark hallway, her head tilted toward my door. The next day, I confronted the landlord. I told him everything: the humming, the knocking, the woman in the hallway. His expression barely changed. He just said quietly, "I warned them not to rent that unit again." But no one listens. I asked what he meant. He sighed. Emily wasn't just missing. When the police came, they found a door in her apartment. A false wall. Behind it was a crawl space and a mirror, broken, with blood on it. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the door, about the mirror, about the smell. At 2 a.m., something inside me snapped. I grabbed a flashlight and hammer and started knocking on the wall where the sound always came from. The plaster cracked easily. Behind it, I found wood, rotting. Then a narrow seam, a hidden door. I pried it open, coughing as dust and mold filled the air. The light flickered. Inside was a small, windowless room. The smell was unbearable. And against the far wall stood a shattered mirror, shards glittering faintly in the beam. Something was written across the glass in dried, dark streaks. She lives in the reflection. My hand shook as I raised the flashlight toward the broken mirror. The beam caught my reflection, fragmented across the shards. Only something was off. My reflection wasn't matching my movements. When I leaned forward, it smiled. I stumbled back, heart hammering, but the image stayed. Wide grin, hollow black eyes staring back at me. Then one of the shards shifted, falling with a sharp clang. Behind it, in the empty frame, a face appeared. Emily, skin gray and cracked, lips torn. She mouthed something, but I couldn't hear it. Then she reached forward, and the surface of the mirror rippled like water. I ran, slamming the hidden door shut and pressing my back against it. The whole wall shuddered once, then went silent. For the rest of the night, I sat there in the dark, knife in hand, staring at the vent. At sunrise, I heard the whisper again, faint, but clearer than before. She's behind you. I turned slowly toward the wall. The cracks had spread, and inside them, eyes were watching. I left the apartment that morning and drove to a motel. I couldn't stay there anymore. But that night, even in a new bed, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me flinch. The hum of the AC, the creak of the floorboards. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to humming. The same 3 notes, coming from the bathroom vent. I screamed and ran outside, barefoot, into the freezing air. I didn't go back. I called the landlord from a payphone and told him I was breaking the lease. He didn't argue. He just sighed and said, "That apartment doesn't let people leave so easily." The next morning, I drove past the building one last time. The police were there. The front door to my old unit was wide open. They were carrying out a body bag. The officer told me later it was found inside the wall between 3A and 3B, decomposed beyond recognition. But the DNA matched someone named Emily Voss. I moved to another city and tried to forget. Months passed. But sometimes I still hear the tune when the house gets too quiet. I deleted all the recordings from that night, except one. The last one. In it, after the humming stops, there's a whisper. "You took my place." Then faintly, my own voice responds, though I never said the words. I'm still here. Now sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I swear my reflection lingers a moment longer than it should. And at night, when the world is still, I hear knocking on the walls. 3 times. Always 3. If you ever move into a new place and your neighbor hums 3 notes through the wall, don't hum back, because she might start singing with your voice next. When I moved into my new apartment, I didn't even know there was a basement unit. The building was old, maybe from the 1950s, with cracked ceilings, uneven floors, and the constant hum of pipes running overhead. It was cheap, and that was enough for me. But a week after moving in, I started smelling something. It came through the vent under my sink, metallic, sour, like rust mixed with rot. The smell grew worse every night. I asked my upstairs neighbor, Jack, if he noticed it too. He just shrugged and said, "That's just the guy downstairs. He's always cooking weird stuff that was news to me. I didn't even know there was a downstairs." So that night, I went looking for the basement. The door to it was hidden behind the laundry room. A rusted metal handle, a chain, and a small lock. But the padlock was hanging open, like someone had just been there. When I opened the door, a cold gust of air rushed past me. The smell was stronger now. From the darkness below, I heard a slow dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the concrete. I couldn't see much, so I used my phone's flashlight and began descending the narrow stairs. The light flickered off the damp walls, revealing faded graffiti and something else. Deep scratches, carved by hand. Halfway down, I heard it again. The dragging sound, followed by the faint clinking of metal. Chains. When I reached the bottom, the smell hit me full force. I covered my nose and turned the light slowly across the basement. It was mostly empty. Old furniture, pipes, and puddles. But in the far corner, I saw movement. A figure hunched over something on the ground. Pale skin, long gray hair. The moment my light hit it, the person froze. Then, very slowly, they turned their head toward me. Their eyes glowed faintly in the light. I stumbled backward up the stairs, heart racing. As I slammed the doors shut, I heard the faint scraping of chains again, followed by a voice whispering from behind the door. "Don't come back." The next morning, I went straight to the landlord's office. His reaction was strange, not surprised, just tired. "You shouldn't go down there," he said flatly. "That unit's been closed for years." I told him I saw someone, alive. He shook his head. "Impossible. The last tenant down there died in '97. Gas leak. The place was sealed afterward. I didn't believe him. I went back to my apartment, locked the door, and tried to forget. But that night, around 1:30 a.m., the smell returned, stronger than ever. And this time, I heard the faint sound of humming. A man's low, broken voice, singing a tune with no words. Then, beneath the hum, came 3 slow bangs from the vent beneath my sink. When I crouched down, something moved behind the grate. The reflection of an eye, watching me from the dark. The humming didn't stop. Every night around the same time, the voice would start, echoing faintly through the floor. Sometimes it sounded like sobbing, sometimes like laughter. I started leaving the TV on to drown it out, but one night the power went out. Silence filled the room. Then I heard footsteps directly beneath my feet. Slow, dragging, heavy. I pressed my ear to the floor. The humming had stopped. Now there was only breathing. And then a whisper. "Can you hear me?" I jumped back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. The voice continued, muffled by the floorboards. "Please, help me. They left me here. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner until dawn, flashlight in hand, staring at the vent. Every so often, I swore I heard the chains dragging again. Closer. The next morning, I decided to check the basement again. Daylight made me brave. But when I reached the laundry room, the basement door was open. The chain was gone. I called out, "Hello?" My voice echoed down the stairs, unanswered. Halfway down, I noticed dark stains on the steps. Not oil, thicker, sticky, blood. It led all the way to the bottom, where the smell was unbearable now. The air was colder too, the kind that makes your breath visible. I followed the trail, step by step until I reached the far wall. The blood stopped there. But something else caught my attention. A large metal hatch in the concrete floor. Scratches surrounded it, like fingernails clawing to escape. And on the hatch, carved deep into the metal, were words that made my blood run cold. "He won't stay dead." I should have left. But curiosity is dangerous. I pried open the hatch. It creaked, releasing a burst of cold, damp air. Beneath it was a ladder leading into pitch darkness. I climbed down slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand. The tunnel below smelled like rot and rust. The walls were wet, lined with pipes that dripped constantly. At the end of the tunnel, I found a small room, maybe 10 feet wide. Inside, there was a single chair bolted to the floor. Chains hung from the ceiling, and on the wall, hundreds of scratch marks, tally marks, like someone had been counting days. But what froze me was the old tape recorder sitting on the chair, covered in dust. I pressed play. Static, then a voice. "Don't open the hatch. Don't feed him. He's not human anymore." I dropped the recorder and ran, the sound of dragging chains following me up the ladder. That night, I barricaded my door with furniture. I didn't leave for 2 days. But on the third night, the smell came back, stronger than ever. It wasn't coming from the vent anymore. It was inside the room. I turned around and saw it. A wet handprint on the floor, then another, leading from the kitchen toward my bedroom. The floor creaked under invisible weight. My flashlight flickered. For a brief moment, I saw him, the man from the basement. Pale skin stretched tight, eyes sunken deep, lips torn open as he dragged his chain behind him. He looked at me and whispered, "You opened the hatch." The light died. The chain rattled once, then silence. By morning, I packed my things. I couldn't take it anymore. But when I reached the door, there was a letter taped to it. The landlord's handwriting. It said, "If you saw him, you can't leave yet. You're the new keeper." It chooses I ran outside to confront him, but his office was empty, dust-covered, abandoned. I found a drawer full of police reports. Every tenant who'd lived in my unit before me, all missing. Each note ended the same way. Last heard strange noises from basement. My hands trembled as I realized the truth. The landlord never existed. The man I spoke to was one of them. When I turned to leave, I saw a dark figure standing in the hallway. The chains scraped slowly across the floor. I decided to end it. That night, I went back to the basement with a can of gasoline and matches. The smell was unbearable, the air thick and wet. I poured fuel across the floor, the walls, the hatch. As I struck the match, I heard it. A voice, soft and pleading. "Don't leave me here again." I looked down and saw 2 pale hands gripping the edge of the hatch, eyes staring up from the darkness. I dropped the match. The fire exploded upward, roaring through the tunnel as I ran. The building shuddered, black smoke filling the air. I didn't stop until I was outside, watching flames consume the windows. But as the fire crackled, I swear I heard chains clinking softly inside the smoke. They said the fire destroyed everything, but the investigators found no body, no remains. The hatch, they said, was open when they arrived. I moved far away, but every now and then, when I lie awake, I hear it again. That faint, dragging chain sound. Sometimes, when I turn on the sink, the pipes rattle, like something crawling through them. I got a letter last week from someone who rented my old building. It said, "Do you know anything about the man in the basement?" He keeps humming at night. I burned the letter. But the humming didn't stop, because now I can hear it through my walls too. I first noticed the smell on a Thursday morning. It wasn't the usual old building mildew. This was heavier, rotten, almost metallic. It seeped through the air vents, filling my kitchen like something was decomposing under the floorboards. My neighbor, Mr. Duncan from apartment 2B, was the quiet type. Mid-50s, bald, with those dead, watchful eyes that made you avoid small talk. He always carried something heavy down to the basement every night, big black trash bags. I told myself it was just garbage, but the sound they made when they hit the floor, it didn't sound like trash. That morning, I decided to ask the landlord about the smell. He sighed and said, "It's probably just the old pipes. Duncan's been here longer than anyone. Keeps to himself." But later that night, I heard dragging sounds from beneath my living room floor, like something being pulled slowly across concrete. And then, a muffled scream. The next day, I followed Duncan when he went downstairs. He moved like someone hiding something, pausing every few steps, looking over his shoulder. The basement door was always locked, but when I peeked down the stairwell, I saw a dim light flickering below and heard a low buzzing noise, like flies. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Curiosity got the better of me, so I took my phone and a small flashlight and went downstairs. The air grew colder the further I went down, the smell stronger. It clung to my throat, thick and sweet. At the bottom of the stairs was the basement door, padlocked, with dark stains smeared around the handle. I leaned closer and realized the stains weren't rust. They were old, brownish red. Blood. Suddenly, I heard a voice whisper from the other side, low, trembling, and female. "Please, help me." I ran back to my apartment, heart hammering. The voice still echoed in my ears. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but the next night, I set my phone to record near the vent that connected to the basement. The next morning, I listened. At first, just static, then a faint dragging sound, and then a voice. It was the same woman whispering, "He keeps me in the dark. He says I sound like her." I froze. I replayed it 3 times. Each time I could hear a second voice in the background, a man's low humming. It was Duncan's voice. I decided to call the police. But when they arrived, Duncan was calm, polite even. He unlocked the basement door, showed them a clean, empty room. No smell, no stains, just concrete. When the officers left, Duncan looked at me from the stairwell and smiled. "Curious neighbors don't last long here," he said quietly. After that night, the basement lights never turned off. Every time I passed the hallway, I could see that faint glow spilling under the door, but no one else in the building seemed to notice. I started dreaming about the woman. In the dreams, she would crawl across the basement floor, her mouth stitched shut, trying to speak through the seams. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, hearing muffled crying through the vents. One night, I caught Duncan leaving again. 3:12 a.m. this time. He was dragging another black bag down the stairs. I recorded him. But when I checked my footage later, the video was black. Only audio remained. Footsteps, dragging, then whispering. "You shouldn't be watching." The next morning, someone had written on my apartment door in red marker, "Stay out of the basement." The police wouldn't come anymore. They called me paranoid. "No evidence," they said. "No smell, no sounds." That evening, someone knocked softly on my door. I hesitated, then opened it. No one was there. But something slid under the gap. A small photograph. It showed the basement. In the corner of the picture, barely visible in the shadows, was the outline of a woman sitting against the wall. I flipped the photo over. Written on the back, "She's not dead yet." That night, I heard chains rattling under the floor again. My ceiling light began to flicker, and for a split second, I saw movement through the vent. A pale hand pressed against the metal grate from the inside. The next morning, Apartment 2C, the one across from Duncan's, was empty. The woman who lived there, Maya, was gone. She'd complained last week about noises coming from the basement, said it kept her awake. Her door was left open, lights still on, breakfast half eaten on the table. No one else in the building seemed to care. When I asked around, the landlord said Maya had moved out suddenly. But the day after she vanished, I heard another voice in the basement, two this time. One crying, one humming. I recorded the sound again, holding my phone against the vent. A faint whisper came through. He feeds the walls. They remember. That night, I heard heavy footsteps above me. But there was no apartment upstairs, only the roof. The sound went on for hours, pacing back and forth, back and forth. When I looked out my window, I could see Duncan standing in the alley, staring straight up at my window. His lips were moving, like he was praying. I couldn't take it anymore. That weekend, when Duncan left, I decided to break into the basement myself. I brought a hammer, flashlight, and my phone recording everything. The padlock was old, one hit and it snapped open. The basement was silent, empty, concrete walls, flickering light bulb. But when I tapped on the far wall, it echoed differently. Hollow. I found a small door behind some stacked boxes, no handle, just a latch. When I pried it open, a rush of foul air hit me. The smell was unbearable. Inside was a narrow crawl space, and in it, old photographs taped to the wall, women's faces all blacked out with marker. There were also several IDs scattered on the ground, including Maya's. Before I could move, the light behind me went out. Footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. Then Duncan's voice. "You shouldn't be here." I froze where I stood, clutching the hammer. Duncan stepped into the faint light from my flashlight, his eyes wide, smiling. "There's no reason to be afraid," he said softly. "They were chosen." Just like her, he pointed toward the far wall. When I turned my flashlight that way, I saw her, the woman from the photograph. Skin pale, eyes hollow, lips trembling. She was chained to the wall, still alive. She whispered weakly, "Run." Duncan lunged. I swung the hammer and ran. My shoulders slammed into the wall, and the false section cracked, revealing something behind it. Bodies, stacked in plastic, sealed tight. Faces frozen mid-scream. Duncan's voice echoed behind me. "You shouldn't have looked." I fled up the stairs, but the basement door slammed shut before I reached it. Darkness swallowed everything. When I woke, I was in my apartment. My head throbbed, blood dried on my shirt. My phone was gone. For a moment, I convinced myself it was a nightmare, until I heard the sound from the vent again. Humming. The tune was different now, slower, almost like a lullaby. Then a whisper. "You belong down here now." I grabbed my spare keys and ran to the landlord's office, but it was empty, files scattered everywhere. On the desk lay a folder labeled Tenant Reports. Inside were photos of every missing tenant over the last 3 years, all from this building, and at the very end, my name. My photo, dated 2 weeks ago. I dropped the file and ran, but when I reached the front door, Duncan was standing there, smiling. "Welcome home," he whispered. "No one has seen me since that night. At least, that's what the news says. But I'm still here, in the walls. I hear him every night, walking the basement, humming that same tune. Sometimes he talks to me, says he's keeping me safe, says I was the last one he needed." If you ever find yourself in an apartment where the rent is too cheap, where the air smells like rust and rot, leave. Don't look in the basement. Don't answer the humming. because once he hears you listening, it's already too late. It started the week after I moved into my new place, a small rented house on the edge of a quiet street. I liked the peace at first. After years in the city, the silence felt like therapy. But that changed when I noticed the man in the window across the street. Every night, around 11:30 p.m., I'd see him standing there, motionless, staring directly at my house. The first night, I brushed it off. Maybe he couldn't sleep. Maybe he was just looking outside. But then it became a routine. Every night, same time, same window, same figure. Never moving, never blinking. He lived alone in the gray house opposite mine. Curtains drawn during the day, but open just wide enough at night for me to see him standing there. I started keeping my lights off, watching him from the shadows. Something about the way he stood, stiff, unnatural, made my stomach knot. And when I finally looked through my camera zoom, I realized he wasn't just facing my house. He was facing me. After a few nights, I decided to take a picture. Proof for myself that I wasn't imagining things. Through my camera lens, I zoomed in and clicked. The flash accidentally went off. My heart froze. For the first time, the man moved. His head tilted slightly, like he'd been waiting for the flash. Then he stepped away from the window, into the darkness. The next morning, there was an envelope on my porch. No name, no note, just a single photograph inside. It was my house, taken from across the street. And in the window, I was standing there, holding my camera. My hands shook as I flipped the photo over. Written in pencil were 4 words: "Don't take pictures." Watch, I ran to the window and looked across the street. The curtains were shut now, but I could feel it. Someone was still there, staring back, hidden just behind the fabric. That night, I didn't turn on any lights. I sat near the window, waiting. Midnight came, and the opposite window glowed faintly again. The man was there, closer now, almost pressed against the glass. His face wasn't clear, just a shadow. I tried to ignore it, but then the lights in my house flickered. Once, twice. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. His lights flickered too, in the exact same rhythm. It was like he was mimicking my house. I turned my lamp off. His light went out. I turned it back on. His did too. I grabbed my phone to record it, but when I aimed the camera, the window across the street was empty. Then, from somewhere inside my house, I heard a creak. The sound of a floorboard under weight. I froze. I lived alone. At 2:17 a.m., my doorbell rang. Once. Long and sharp. I didn't move. My phone showed no one on the porch camera, just the dark, empty street. Then it rang again and again. Finally, I crept toward the door, heart hammering. I peered through the peephole. No one, just silence. When I opened the door, against every instinct screaming not to, there was another envelope on the doormat. Inside was a Polaroid photo of me, asleep in bed. The photo had been taken from inside my room. My phone fell from my hand. I turned around slowly, neck abyssoise, every muscle locked with terror. The window across the street was still glowing faintly, and this time, the curtain was open wide. I called the police the next morning. 2 officers arrived, took my statement, and promised to check it out. They went across the street. I watched through the blinds as they knocked, waited, knocked again. Finally, they entered through the unlocked door. A few minutes later, one of them came out, pale, shaking his head. When I asked what they saw, he just muttered, "No one's lived there in months." I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. The house had been empty for over a year. The owner had died. The electricity was disconnected. I didn't believe it. That night, when I looked again, the light was back, and the man was there. Same window, same posture. Only this time, he was holding something. My camera. Sleep became impossible. I kept every light on, every door locked. But the tapping started anyway. Soft knocks on my windows, slow and patient. Always 3 taps. Then silence. Then again. I recorded the sound, but when I played it back, there was something else beneath it. A voice whispering, "Let me see you." I stopped going near the windows altogether. I slept on the couch, lights still burning. But every morning, I'd find the curtains moved slightly, like someone had peeked inside during the night. And then one morning, my neighbor across the street, the real neighbor who'd just moved in 2 doors down, stopped me outside. "You should close your blinds," she said quietly. "Why?" I asked. "Because every night," she whispered, "I see someone standing behind you in the window." That night, I couldn't sit still. My nerves were shredded. I closed every curtain, covered every window with bed sheets, even turned mirrors to the wall. But somehow, I could still feel him watching. I sat on the floor, flashlight in hand, when something flickered across the wall, like light from a passing car. Only there were no cars. I looked toward the covered window and saw the faintest glow coming through the sheet. Someone outside was shining a flashlight straight into my house. I crept closer and lifted the corner of the sheet. He was standing in the middle of the street, not in his window anymore, right there, under the streetlight, facing my house. I froze. He raised his hand slowly and pointed at me. I dropped the sheet and backed away, shaking. When I dared to peek again, he was gone. But the streetlight was still flickering. And on my window glass, from the outside, there were fresh handprints. The next day, I installed a security camera facing the street. I had to know if I was losing my mind. That night, I hid in my room and let the camera run. When I checked the footage the next morning, my stomach turned cold. At exactly 2:46 a.m., the streetlight across the road flickered on. The man appeared, not walking, but standing instantly in the frame, as if he'd just materialized. He stood motionless for several minutes, facing my house. Then he raised his arm and pointed again, but this time toward the camera. The feed distorted, glitching into static. When the image returned, he was gone. But in the final frame, something new appeared. A faint reflection in my own window. A second face, standing behind me. By the next night, I couldn't bear to stay inside. I packed my bag, ready to leave. But before I could lock the doorbell rang again. Long and slow, my heart stopped. Through the peephole, I saw him. The same man from the window, only now he was right there, standing on my porch, face pale under the porch light, eyes empty black. He tilted his head and whispered something I couldn't hear through the door. Then, slowly, he held something up. My missing camera. And in the camera's reflection, I saw movement. Someone standing behind me. I turned around instantly. Nothing. Just my living room. Lights dim. But when I turned back to the door, he was gone. Only a faint shape remained, smeared across the glass. Like the outline of a face pressed hard against it. I moved out the next morning. Left everything behind. The furniture, my clothes, even my phone. I didn't care. I just wanted to forget that street, that window, that man. For months, I tried to rebuild my life. New apartment, new town, new number. But one night, while unpacking boxes in my new place, I glanced out the window and froze. Across the street stood another house, curtains half open, a faint glow from inside. And there, framed perfectly in the window, was a man, tall, motionless, staring straight at me. It took me a moment to realize. The window looked identical. The streetlight was in the same place, the same crack on the glass. I wasn't in a new town. I'd moved across the street. When I moved into my new duplex, I thought I'd finally found peace. Small town, quiet street, cheap rent. My only neighbor was an old man named Mr. Gray. He lived alone on the other side of the shared basement. The first night, I heard it, a low humming noise coming through the floorboards, like machinery running underground. It stopped around 3 a.m. I assumed maybe a water heater or old pipes. But the next night, the sound came again. Clank, shuffle. It went on for hours, sometimes followed by faint thudding, like someone dragging something heavy across the basement floor. I decided to ask him about it. When I knocked on his door the next morning, he opened it just a crack. "Do you use something in the basement at night?" I asked. He smiled faintly, but his eyes didn't move. "No, I don't go down there after dark," and then he closed the door. That night the sound came again, louder, but this time I heard something else under it. A soft, muffled crying. Curiosity started eating at me. The basement door was in the hallway, shared between both sides of the duplex. I'd never opened it before. At midnight, when the humming started again, I grabbed a flashlight and crept out of my room. The door had a heavy padlock on it, rusted but new enough to still work. I pressed my ear against it. Thud, shuffle. And then, a voice. It whispered something. I couldn't make out the words. The next morning I went to the landlord. He said, "That side used to be rented to a family, but they left suddenly last winter." Mr. Gray asked to keep the basement locked for safety. That night, the sounds grew worse. The crying became clearer. Now it was definitely a child's voice. I called out, "Hello? Are you okay down there?" The noise stopped. Then a few seconds later, something tapped from the other side of the door. 3 slow knocks. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, I waited for Mr. Gray to leave. He always walked to the grocery store around 10 a.m. When he was gone, I took a hammer and broke the lock. The smell hit me first, damp, metallic, and foul. The stairs creaked as I descended. My flashlight beam swept across the basement. Old furniture, wires hanging, and in one corner, a door. Metal, bolted shut from this side. The humming sound came from behind that door. I could hear movement too. Soft shuffling, maybe breathing. Then something touched my ankle. I jumped back, flashlight shaking, and saw a small handprint on the floor, smeared in dirt. I ran upstairs, locked the door, and called the police. But when they arrived, the basement was spotless. No lock, no smell, no second door. The officer looked annoyed. "You sure you're not hearing things?" But before he left, he said something that froze me. "Mr. Gray died 2 years ago. That side's been empty. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying what the officer said. If Mr. Gray was dead, then who had I been talking to all this time?" Around 2:40 a.m., the humming began again. I covered my ears. But then came the crying. Clear this time, pleading. "Please, let me out." I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and turned on every light in the house. The crying stopped, and then a voice whispered from the vent. "He keeps us here. I froze, staring at the vent grill. Cold air brushed against my face. Then, a small, dirty hand reached out through the vent slats. I screamed and stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. When I looked again, the hand was gone. But on the vent's metal surface, faint fingerprints remained, the size of a child's. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was just stress. Maybe sleep deprivation. Maybe my mind playing tricks after what the cops said. But when I opened my front door to grab the mail, there was a note lying on the mat. It looked old, the paper yellowed and edges curled. Written in shaky handwriting, "Don't open the door again." He doesn't like the light. I called the police again, told them everything. 2 officers came this time. They searched the basement top to bottom, but again, found nothing strange. The lock was gone, the floor spotless. Then one officer looked at me and said, "You said you live next to Mr. Gray. You sure about that? This whole building's under renovation. You're the only tenant for now." That night, I decided to record everything. I placed my phone by the basement door and let it record overnight. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to the loudest noise yet. Metal clanging, dragging sounds, and a child sobbing. I ran to the phone the next morning and checked the recording. The last thing it captured made my blood turn cold. A man's voice whispering right next to the mic. "You shouldn't have come down here." Terrified, I called a friend from work, Clara. I told her everything, and she agreed to come stay the night. We sat in the living room with all the lights on, drinking coffee and waiting. Around 2:45 a.m., the humming began again. Clara looked at me, eyes wide. "You hear that too?" I nodded. Finally, someone else could hear it. We followed the noise toward the basement door. Clara, shaking but curious, took her phone and snapped a few pictures down the steps. The flash flickered, once, twice, and then her face went pale. She showed me the photos. In the first one, the basement looked empty. In the second, faint outlines of 3 figures stood in the far corner, small, thin, unmoving. In the third photo, they were closer. Before we could react, the humming stopped. Silence. Then, from the dark basement, came a whisper. This time, 2 voices overlapping. "You took their picture." We bolted out of the house, staying in the car till sunrise. When we returned, all the photos were gone from her phone. Every single one. I couldn't live like that anymore. The next morning, I packed my things, ready to move out. But as I dragged the suitcase near the basement door, it swung open by itself. Cold air rushed out, carrying that same metallic smell. Something made me stop. A soft child's voice said, "Please, just one more light." I turned on my phone flashlight and stepped down. The air was thick, heavy. I reached the bottom and saw the walls here, but this time, there was a new crack running through the concrete. It looked like the outline of a door. I pressed against it, and it gave way. Behind it was a hidden room. Small, filthy, with chains bolted to the wall and a single mattress rotting in the corner. And carved above the bed, with something sharp, were words that made me shiver. They never left. I stumbled backward, gasping, when I heard faint breathing behind me. I turned, flashlight trembling, but the stairs were empty. Then, from the dark, Mr. Gray's voice whispered, "Now you know." I ran upstairs and called Clara again, but she didn't pick up. Later, her number was disconnected. When I called her office, they said she hadn't shown up for work, and her apartment was empty. For the next few days, I barely slept. Every night, the humming returned. And every morning, new marks appeared near the basement door, tiny footprints, handprints on the floor, as if children had been walking through the house. One evening, I returned from work to find the door wide open again. A faint light glowed from below, flickering like candlelight. Against every instinct, I peered down. At the bottom of the stairs stood Clara. Her skin looked pale, her eyes distant. "Come down," she said softly. "They want to meet you." I backed away slowly, shaking my head. But then something grabbed my ankle, a cold, small hand pulling hard. I kicked free and slammed the door. The humming turned into screams that shook the entire floor. The next morning, I got a call from the landlord. He said construction workers found something under the foundation. A sealed chamber filled with bones. Small ones. Children's bones. Police reopened an old case file. The family who'd lived there before, a mother and 2 kids, went missing 5 years ago. Their neighbor, Mr. Gray, was the last person to see them alive. Apparently, before he died, he'd confessed to the murders. He told the police, "They're still with me, beneath the house." But they never found the bodies. Now they had. That night, when I tried to sleep, I heard a whisper at the vent again. "Thank you for finding us." Then another voice, deeper, rougher, "Mr. Gray's. But you shouldn't have looked. The house was sealed off the next day. I moved to a new city, trying to forget. But even now, years later, when I close my eyes at night, I still hear it. That low hum, that metallic sound echoing beneath the floorboards. And sometimes, if I stay awake long enough, I hear a child's voice whispering from nowhere. "Please, one more light." Last month, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small, rusted padlock, the same one from the basement door. And attached to it was a note. "You were never supposed to leave." The humming started again that night. But this time, it wasn't coming from the floor. It was coming from inside my walls, and that was the basement next door. From the outside, every neighborhood seems peaceful. But sometimes, what hides behind those walls should never be disturbed. Thank you for staying with me through these 7 most disturbing true neighbor horror stories. Sleep well, if you can. Thanks for watching. This was Dark Fears.